Welcome, everyone, to Seek, Go, Create. This is where we redefine success in leadership, business, and in ministry. We're going to emphasize that redefining success today because we're going to discuss a good bit about leadership, but discuss some things that just might need to be busted up as far as norms and some things we see in the areas of leaders and what leadership teams look like and how they should look. And I'm excited about having that conversation today. I think it's going to push me a little bit. I'm going to kind of open up some things about the way I think. I enjoy it when I get a little bit uncomfortable about preparing for a conversation like this. So we're going to jump right into it, and I'm glad you're here. Today we have Coco Brown. She's the CEO and founder of the Athena Alliance. It's a networking organization with over 5,000 plus C-level women, VCs, and CEOs that represent over 200 plus companies. She's got quite the resume and bio. I won't get into all that now. Coco, welcome to Seek, Go, Create.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Glad you're here. We were talking before we hit record about your name. We'll get to that in just a moment. I want to get to my first question just to kind of get things rolling. And that is, we bump into each somewhere, we're networking, and I ask you, what do you do, Coco? What do you tell someone when they ask you what you do?
I like to use some of your language. Actually, it's that redefining. So we're reimagining, redefining, revolutionizing the way senior leaders advance their careers, stay connected with the world, stay connected with each other. And if you want to sort of create some imagery around that, imagine if LinkedIn worked the way Airbnb does to find the right person to talk to at the right time. And imagine if Netflix were for business, so categories aren't comedy and family and drama. The categories are M&A and compensation oversight and, mega trends and risk. And so you could explore and engage exactly like you do with Netflix. Well, those two pieces are two big parts of what Athena does. And today we're only working with women because women are half the sky, and women, really need the greatest competitive advantage in moving forward faster.
Yeah, so here's my first question. We'll just dive right into the deep end of the pool immediately. And that is, why do we need to redefine that? What does it look like now? What's the problem?
Yeah.
I mean, because some people are blah, blah, blah. There is no problem. Why would we need to redefine it? What's going on?
Okay, well, just redefining leadership and in terms of how you develop leaders, have leaders stay on top of things, help leaders advance. If you think about, for one thing, business is moving so fast, right? Technology is making things move really, 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 really quickly. But then as a result of that, you're also seeing new business models, new industries, new roles in business all the time. And then you're seeing geopolitical landscapes changing and who you define as your customer out there. And like all sorts of things are changing and moving so fast that the old models of learning and access to advancement and knowledge and wisdom are not sufficient in today's world. So the old models are academic models, but those old models can't keep up with the pace of change. What's happening is actually not academics setting the tone for what's the future. It's actually operators, people out there in the field that are creating what's new and next. And, so for example, it's always easier if you can imagine this. We had a member who said, I'm shutting down Russia offices in Russia. Who do I talk to? Right. So if you imagine the old model is like, who do I go talk to? You don't know, you're trying to, talk to your lawyers but in our model, you find the right person out there in the ecosystem who has experience like the one that you're trying to get or sat across from the table that you're about to approach, et cetera. The second big challenge that needs to be redefined is how people, leverage not just each other, but also learning. So that's where the Netflix piece comes in. It's, you need constant new content that is on the forefront of what's happening, delivered to you Netflix style, and constantly changing and evolving and just rapid fire. And so that's where companies are engaging with us to be the executive development solution for their senior leaders to keep them on top of what's going on in the world. So those are two of the big things.
So a couple things, and I didn't really prep you on this, but I'll go ahead and tell you. There are times that I like to play maybe devil's advocate just for us to kind of have a fun conversation. May not be my total belief system, but I'll share it. You know, we're in such a hyper connected world, in my opinion, just observation. I mean, right now we've got people probably listening in, you know, either live or at some point to this interview. And last time we counted 28, 30 countries. You know, people are able to engage and listen in all these areas. And, you know, you could actually connect with people with all the platforms and all that we have. So my bit of a cynical question is, why do we need more connection there? Don't we already have that? Don't we have the ability to do that now, Coco? So why do we need other mechanisms to help with that? Again, I think I know the answer,
Yeah.
but I'm trying to I'm poking holes in your theory here.
Yeah, that's great. Well, a lot of those solutions that are out there are unidirectional, right? It's not bi-directional. So somebody out there, our communities all over the globe too. And so a member of Athena in Switzerland can reach a member of Athena in Topeka, Kansas for a right time conversation. There aren't a lot of solutions. You could say, well, LinkedIn, but there aren't solutions out there that do that. They're becoming more solutions that do that because it's the right path. But if you think about most of them, you can't really find each other. They're designed around sales and recruiting. They're designed, you know, not around keyword searches and, you know, experiential. And I'm trying to find the right person to talk to because I need the right person to talk to. It's more about, I want to hire that person or sell to that person. So the feasibility is out there. The structure hasn't been created yet, you know, so that's what we're addressing. The way we think about the mental model of it is, what if you took all of the goodness of a college campus and you put it into a digital virtual environment under one roof, right? So what is the goodness of a college campus? It's not just education. It's not just classrooms, right? There's the walks between the classes and the time that the professor is writing down the whiteboard and you're meeting new friends and you're making connections, and those connections happen because you're part of the same social group, or, you know, so think peer groups and learning circles. And there's a lot that sits under our roof that is all those same kinds of things that you'd experience in what makes a college experience so beautiful. That is both social as well as academic. And then because of what we are, the outside world comes recruiting. So we've helped over 400 women join board seats or grab board seats. So that's kind of like, hey, by the way, here's our career center. Goldman Sachs is coming recruiting next week, right? So we envisioned this concept of moving forward as a senior leader in a different way for how senior leaders in today's world need to engage, which is digital.
Yeah, the good thing about that, actually, the first thought I had when you started answering was when I jump into LinkedIn, often the first thing that happens when I go to my messages in LinkedIn is someone's trying to sell me something.
Yeah.
You know, I've got executive coach, podcaster, author, you know, in my title, and there is someone always trying to sell something related to the book or the podcast or even coaching for that matter. They're trying to deliver me, quote unquote, the 6 and 7 figure coaching clients. And anyway, I don't want to come across cynical with that, but so it seems to me it's just a safe place with an intentional purpose. I like the college campus. I was actually thinking back to my days at Georgia Tech, thinking about those college campus experiences. And I think that's powerful because you have people somewhat connected, but yet very diverse. There's people from all over that are coming in. And I kind of like that. Is it sometimes this is a negative word. I'm not meaning it negative. Is it a competitive environment? Is it a competitive atmosphere there? Is it the competition, you leave it at the door? Because the college campus has a bit of competitiveness to it.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
No. Yeah, absolutely. No, it's not at all a competitive environment. There isn't the top of the, you know, we're not vying for top of the class. There are no grades. So none of those things exist, right? That create competition. But even beyond that, we are underdogs by nature of the fact that today we only serve women and non-binary people, people who identify as female or non-binary. We serve underdogs in that sense, and so one of the things that our model is very conscientious about is ridding ourselves of a scarcity mindset, building an abundance mindset, and really leveraging one another to create abundance, right? So my need to talk to you today about shutting down offices in Russia is your need tomorrow to talk to me about my perspective on the global workforce and how it's evolving, right? And there's no sales, there's no recruiting, right? There's not that. So we're not trying to get something out of each other other than wisdom and experience. And so that creates a really collegial, and that's why I sort of relate it to that college like campus. And then real relationships are developed because we see each other in all of these different ways, live virtual salons, peer groups, and we have humans in the loops in the right way, where we say, let us make the connections for you. I know it's awkward to reach out to someone. So there's a lot to the model that we've really thought through in terms of how to create intimacy. One of the things we say, by the way, in our salons is show up as you are. We don't care if yesterday I didn't have any makeup on because I decided not to. Show up as you are. Be video on, be video off. We don't care if you're video on and you're eating your lunch, fine. Just sit back a little bit so we don't see it go into your mouth. But we don't have any pomp and circumstance in our ecosystem at all. We don't tolerate it. We're not into that. We're not into that.
Yeah, I just was thinking about one cool thing I remember from the college experience is that you do get stretched from being around some, when I was my collegiate experience, I was around some very bright people, and many times I felt as if I was probably in over my head, but it stretched me. I did things I think beyond what I could have done solo in that solo environment. But I want to circle back to something you said because it kind of triggered me. You brought up that you have like this come as you are meetings and meetups and things like that. And this was the thought that popped in my head, so I'm just going to say it and you could take it and run with it. I'm not sure if a group of guys, it would matter. Why is that important when you're in primarily a woman focused organization? Because there are differences, and I want us to be able to go there if we can. but it's like a bunch of guys. I don't think I would ever say, "Oh, listen, guys, we're just kind of come as you are. Don't worry about your hair. Wear your best black T-shirt. Whatever." Why is that important with a group that's woman focused?
For a number of reasons. One, if you want to embrace diversity, you have to let everyone know that whoever they are is great. And, so if you have diverse women, which we do, 37% racially diverse as an example, we want that racially diverse community to know that they can show up however they want to. And hair, head, face is a really big thing in the world of women, right? Men, they don't have hijabs, they don't have scarves, they don't have, they don't have the same sorts of challenges that Black women have with coarse hair. They and women in general have been told, in business settings, you always wear your hair up, you don't wear your hair down if you want to be taken seriously. So there's so much about how you show up that is embedded in the female experience. When I was just starting out in my career, I moved really quickly. I was a VP by the time I was 27 years old. And I was told early on, I looked young that, for my age, and they would, wear your hair up, wear your glasses instead of your contacts, wear makeup, don't not wear makeup. And there came a point where where I was, president, COO of a company, and I decided I'm not wearing makeup any longer. I'm not doing it. And wearing my hair down if I want to. And I did. And this is a highly technical IT company, by the way, where most all of our customers and all of our staff in the field were men. And, so I have always wanted to say to women, look, you're on the run, you're on the go. I don't care if you're sitting on your Peloton or you feel sweaty or whatever. This is not the point. So that's why I show up a lot of times with my hair up and no makeup on, and, just to try to make it comfortable. It is important. I've never had anybody ask me that before, but that's a fundamental in the world of women.
Well, it's kind of this weird thing. And again, we're focusing on redefining success. And one of the things that I have observed in myself, and I think we try to cleanse some of these things, is that when we see people, we're sometimes quick to judge, come to conclude, things like that. I hate that, but I don't know how to wipe it out. I interviewed a group of a startup young guys from their dorm room one time that had this startup app that was a dating app. And what they were doing, it's fascinating.
Sounds like Facebook, but go on.
Well, no, they actually a little bit different. They were attempting to remove the looks from the dating aspect, which I love the thought of. They're still working through some things, obviously, but it was basically you do like this questionnaire and you answer some questions back and forth before you ever see what someone looks like, which it's a fascinating thing because even in the world I'm in, I'll get like a bio from someone like you, and, that's typically got a picture, and we got pictures on LinkedIn and all that. I do think it would be kind of interesting to attempt to remove that. I don't see that happening. But I do agree that people kind of look at perceptions and things like that.
Well, it's absolutely an issue. I mean, here's a great example of it. People think that, they wonder about women as computer scientists and engineers. There's a product called GitHub, which is like sort of the biggest central, it's the repository you use for holding software and checking software in and out. It's like it just for people who don't understand is you check the software in and out, you make the changes to the software, you check it back in, and that way you can track any of the changes, you can revert back if any of the if something problematic happens. And so you're logging, which engineer is checking it in, which engineer is checking it out, et cetera. So they have, billions of data points in here, right? And so they did a study, and they said, if we anonymize the data, whose data gets accepted, whose software gets accepted more often? 4% higher women. If you don't anonymize the data, which software gets received most often? Women go lower than 50% now. So the bias, this is a fundamental issue in the world. Bias exists. We all are biased towards what looks like me, what reminds me of me, what I've seen to be successful, which tends to be my tribe around me. So we're biased. It's natural.
And we get pigeonholed into our tribes, and then we start thinking like our tribes. That's the thing. That's the reason I love conversations like this. And for those listening and may not see me, I'm a 59-year-old, little bit of gray in my beard, white dude. And I actually at times wonder if my people are part of the problem. I think many people would say that. But then sometimes I could tell you this is, and we'll go here with this conversation, I'm wondering if we have a clue why we're part of the problem. That's one of the issues. It's like I don't even think we understand it at times. But let's talk about the looks bias. I've got a little bit of gray in my beard. I'm 59 years old. You are, I'm sure, younger. I'm not going to ask your age.
Almost 53.
53. So we're both in our 50s. And the unfortunate thing is that if you and I both walk into a room and we don't put titles or anything on anything. You've got a much higher credentials and all of that. There will be people that may look at me as the leader.
Yes. Oh, absolutely.
And I'm not saying that's good. I'm just saying that's unfortunately the way it is, right?
Well, yeah, and I think part of it requires a little reflection on history, right? Like, let's just take one lens on it that most people don't even think about. The first stock markets were created 300 years ago in Belgium, France, a couple, it's like debatable. There were a few of them at basically the same time. Mm-hmm. Why were they created? Basically so that white European men could pool their risks together and go conquer the world, right? No, right. Quite frankly, right? I mean, what were they doing at the time? They're conquering the world, right? A pirate is a privateer if they work under a regime. So the idea is, rather than just having the monarchies going out and conquering the world with all their riches, well, let's get the business guys together and conquer the world as a collective. We can create riches, right? And yeah, we get smaller output, but we also get smaller risk. So men, white men, European white men have been doing business together, taking risks, like while they're off with their snuffers and brandies and cigars, talking about business and politics, women are, off talking about family and society and whatnot. And that's white women, by the way, because, that's the white women privilege, right? And right. It's like asking a fish to describe water. You don't understand it because that's been your water for centuries.
Yeah. And I mean, it's baked in. That's why I say I like pressing with these conversations, because I mean, when I read some things like I read on your bio and all, I'm going, ooh, I think I'm going to let her hit me with the 5 questions that allow someone to find out what the culture's like in an organization. We'll do that later, I think, before we finish up. I'm going to pretend that I'm hiring and that I'm the guy that's leading, and I'm going to let you hit me with 5 questions to find out what the culture is like at my organization. I think that'll be kind of fun. We'll get to that in a moment, but I really do, and I realize just some. I think this word is sometimes overused, but it's the best one we've got. The privilege that I've got from just being who I am and what I am, and so I do try to press and ask questions, and I think it's really cool that there's organizations. I believe what Athena is doing is attempting to redefine what we're looking like in those arenas. Would that be correct?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the vision I have is of a world where the top of business society mimics the demographics of the society that it serves, engages with, etc. So, by definition, that has to redefine not just who's there, but how are they there and how does it operate? Mm-hmm. Just even from a very simple perspective, as an example, on that how piece, it's a fact that women, nurture nature, whatever, we can argue about why, but it's a fact that women take the bulk of the responsibility for the things back at home, whether it's elderly family, extended family, young family, just the community around. It's a fact that women do it, whether it's because we are more disposed to want to do it, or we've been conditioned from a very young age to do it, whatever, fact is fact, right? So the conditions we need around ourselves in order to juggle that and the career we want means that we require a level of flexibility and trust that hasn't necessarily had to be in the system if it's men. So when an Elon Musk says everybody back to work, he doesn't understand what he's saying and how much of his, sort of ecosystem he's disenfranchising by the fact that we could do better, frankly, if we were allowed to make that decision for ourselves.
Yeah, and so many questions floating around in my head. I think what I'd like to do here, I want to have a deeper conversation just about leadership, and we're not going to totally leave this topic of just what we see in the world with you mentioned earlier that the goal would be for the leadership positions roles to look like the demographics, which as best I could tell, that means 50-50, and I know we're a long way from that. So we're going to talk about some things related to where we are now and how we get there. But I wanted to back up a
Okay,
little.
can I just,
Sure.
it's beyond 50. It's sure, male, female, 50-50, but like 4% of top leadership roles are held by people of color. So it's even beyond that. There's a real big problem. But
Yeah.
anyway,
And I get concerned at times with, I mean, when we really start talking diversity, I mean, are we really diverse when we talk about spiritual backgrounds? Are we really diverse when we talk about mindsets? I mean, I mean, just anyway, we're going to go down that road in just a moment. But I really like to at times talk to people about their story. And you and I, before we hit record, you mentioned kind of the origin of your name. I think I told you you may have the coolest name of anyone that I've interviewed at Seek Go Create, because Coco Brown just, it seems like someone that should be really famous, I think. And so I don't, or pop star, I don't know, something like that. And as I kept wanting to find out origins of your name, I never really did a lot of research on that. But tell me, right before we hit record, you were telling me a little bit about that. Let's kind of back up. I'd like to learn a little bit more about Coco, and then we're going to jump back into some of the things related to leadership and all that we were talking about. So give me a little bit of your background and how'd that name come to be? How'd you get the coolest name that's ever been interviewed at Seek Go Create?
well, I have my parents to thank for that. I was born in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, Petaling Jaya, more specifically for people who know the area. And my dad was teaching economics at the University of Malaysia, and my mom was a social worker. She went on to get a PhD in psychology and family therapy, and so she went down that path. He was the educator, and my dad was writing a book on the commodity control of cocoa beans. So cocoa beans are, he was studying the commodities of developing nations as an economist, and cocoa beans are a fundamental, economy commodity. So last name Brown. So my parents thought, this is 1970. My parents thought, wouldn't it be cool? A little cocoa bean, so I was born Coco Brown. That's the origin story. We lived in Malaysia for 3.5 years. I've been to 25% of the countries in the world, and definitely a globetrotter like you, a global nomad, I like to call myself. And yeah, so parents to thank for my name.
All right. So we've said it's a cool name. What's been like the biggest positive about having a name like that, and what's been something that might be a negative about having a name like Coco Brown?
This is sort of an interesting diversity thing, actually.
Yeah.
One thing that's been really cool is you tend to be the only Coco Brown, and so people remember you. The other thing that I always thought was really cool is actually, if you Google Coco Brown, 90% or more of who would pop up are Black women.
Yes.
In fact, actually, my freshman roommate in college, when she saw my name on my laundry bag, Coco Brown, she was like, oh, my roommate's a Black woman. And then she met me and she was like, oh my God, you're not at all what I thought you're, and I was like, oh, that's so funny. That's so cool. So, I kind of like that people imagine that I'm going to be somebody else. And, my mom always, she would always say, well, Coco, you have some Black in you because your great grand aunt, whatever, and then you also, have Ashkenazi Jew. Well, it turns out that neither of these things are actually true. I did a 23andMe and I was crushed. I was like, I want to be racially diverse myself. I love that. Those are the cool things. And, a name that stands out. I mean, the negatives are the people who want to change you. The people who say, well, that's not a name people will take seriously. When I was really young, they didn't want me to have my name be Coco Brown in a business context because it's not a serious business name. Or people who will look at me differently and treat me differently off the bat because I have what they would think of as a cheeky nickname name that I clearly created as a nickname, right? Mm-hmm. So that's the negative, but I feel like, that's on them.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, when I only see the names before I start looking at the info of kind of how we do our interviews here. I made the assumption. We shouldn't assume. I made the assumption I was going to be talking to an African American woman. I really did. It's like, and I'm sorry, you brought it up so I could kind of say, yeah, I messed up. And then when I see the info, I'm going, oh, well, okay. And I even asked my wife actually runs a lot of the operations and all. I said, is this the right match here? Is this? And then fascinating. You start reading through all that you've done and your background and all. And so that's kind of the next thing I wanted to go with. Obviously, you have education as a background with your parents and all of that. And I think I saw where you went to the University of Pennsylvania, I think Wharton School of Business, which is, one of the tops that's out there.
I
Uh,
did not go to I went I was a psych major at UPenn. Yeah.
ah, okay.
But I've spoken at Wharton at their reunion recently. So that was MBA, executive MBA reunion. But yeah.
Very cool. So here's the thing. I don't want us to maybe rehash your journey, your path, but obviously you were moving along very quickly to reach some of the levels you did by the age of 27 that you mentioned earlier. But what I'd love to find out is, and I don't know if we could call them challenges or an event or something along the way where you were forced to redefine what success meant to you or what you thought it looked like. And it could be this big overarching, topic we're talking about of just being a female in a male dominated situation. But does anything come to mind when I say, hey, what's a time either you thought it might have been a failure or a, set you back that might have been where you had to kind of step back and redefine kind of who you were or what you thought you were moving towards?
Absolutely. So there was a time. I spent 17 years at my last company,
Hmm.
and and it, the the ending of that era for me was devastating,
Hmm.
because I had attached my um, who I was so tightly to that company. I was the
Hmm.
president and COO of the company. The entire company reported to me. I was the only report to the CEO. I was one of three owners of the company. I was on the board. I grew it to 54 million in revenue. I had, my identity was wrapped up in this company. And people would, much to my absolute horror, would say, Coco, it goes in this order for you. First house, then your kids, then your husband. And I would say, oh my God, that's how I'm viewed. That's horrible. But when when I extracted from that, that it was one of those experiences where you can't be in it and also thinking about what's next. So there I was kind of figuring out, like, what is next? Who am I now? And how do I define success? And that's when Athena was born. It was actually born out of a dinner group that I had started in 2005 that just grew and grew and grew and grew, of female chief information officers who kind of gave me a mandate one day and said, this is what you're going to do next, Coco, and go solve this problem and build something out of it. And I, in the process of doing that, I redefined success. I've made less money in the last 6 years than I made, sometimes in 1 year. Like,
Hmm.
so, it certainly isn't money right now. Not,
Sure.
so I had to redefine success as what I'm going to be for the world and how I'm going to change the world for the better, not just be a successful, leader of an IT company. I wanted to do something very, very meaningful in the world and do it by example as well. So my
Hmm.
company is 100% remote. I have teammates who are living on the go. I have people in Africa, a couple of people living in Africa, a couple of people living in South, a number of people living in Central and South America. And I wanted to build a structure where there was high levels of trust, high levels of transparency, high levels of independence, so the way I define success is, do my kids think I'm successful? Am I successful for them? Am I there for them when they need me? Do I drop things to be there for them? Can I drop things to be there for them? And then does my team feel, and my husband, and does my team feel that way? And so that's how I define success. And then, can I be the change I wish to see in the world? And am I doing that? Am I changing the world?
Yeah, the reason, thank you for responding to that, because I could tell that there were probably some things there that there's more to the story, which is fine. And I get it. I mean, people that have listened in here know that some of the reason why we talk about redefining success is just some of the rawness of some of the things we've been through with companies that failed and financial challenges and all. But my wife and I say this all the time, and I'm going to say it as a statement, and I'm going to let you respond, is that we would not wish a lot of what we went through on anyone else. However, we're so thankful we went through it because of who we are today.
Yeah.
And it sounds as if maybe Athena may not exist if it weren't for that adjustment or redefining that you went through 6 years ago. Would that be correct?
That I think I eventually would have gotten to Athena anyway. Eventually I would have gotten to Athena anyway. But it is true to say that Athena does come out of all of my experiences. It is, and I've struggled a lot. I've struggled with the fundamental structure of the business world that's based on a factory model of the 1800s. I've struggled as a woman in a highly, male dominated field. I've struggled as a parent. I've struggled with learning. I've struggled, that's why I think eventually I would have gotten to Athena anyway, is because so much of what Athena is, it comes from all of the things that I struggled with. And it is true too, all the things that have happened to me, I wouldn't want them to happen to anybody else. And if I could redo them, they wouldn't have happened to me.
Oh,
And at the same time, I love my life and I love what I'm doing. So I'm proud of where I am.
yeah. You mentioned the word identity. When you first started talking, I even in my head said, "Oh, identity." She's about to say that her identity was tied to a position, a role, a company, maybe the financial aspect of it. And I think that's a challenge for many people. We'll call them achievers, people that are moving along, corporate, this structure. I'm going to ask you about structure in a little while, because I've also said the same thing, that we have, I think what we're doing is we're attempting some things within a structure that doesn't allow some of the things we try to do. It's just a structure that's flawed. But I want you to talk a little bit more about identity, and maybe speak to someone who may be listening in, maybe even specifically a woman, that their identity is really tied up with their title, their position, the job, how much money they're making, all of those things, because it seems like everybody I talk to, maybe it's just the role I'm in, that was the case. They kind of get that busted up at some point. So talk a little bit more about that identity piece.
Well, and actually, I'll take it to a little bit of a very vulnerable place for you, because, I think one of the biggest challenges in marriages, at least in, the US system, and maybe it's everywhere, is the identity crisis that happens when there's a primary breadwinner and a primary homemaker. And what happens is if the primary, this was our case, I was the primary breadwinner, and we made a decision between us that we had enough income that one of us could stay home and one of us was going to stay home. And it was a decision that would have equally been one or the other of us, but we went for it based on who had the bigger job at the time. So I had the bigger job at the time. So my husband said, "Okay, I'll stay home." And my job got bigger and bigger and bigger, and prominence and prominence and prominence. And so my identity in society, where somebody would say, "Well, what do you do?" And I could say, "Well, I'm this," And my husband's identity got increasingly into the space of, I'm her plus one. I'm just Coco's, husband. And we spent a lot of time talking about his identity and what was his identity. And he needed a different identity. And he became a real estate professional. He started doing woodworking and becoming a furniture maker. And so, identity is, and it crushes you, because if you can't put identity in parallel to each other, then it can become the core resentment in the relationship. You get to keep moving forward and I'm staying stuck, and well, you get what I want to be with the kids, so there's this real big issue. And I was reading about I think it's Netherlands or Sweden recently, and one of the things they talk about is, why are they the happiest place on earth? Part of it is because they don't get tied up in identity the way that we do. They don't define themselves based on how they compare to their neighbors. They define themselves on their own personal sense of success and, accomplishment and career. And so I see women all the time, for example, and men too, like, well, I shouldn't take that job because it's actually a step down in title from where my title is right now. And I'm like, who cares about title? Is it a step up or a step over in the kinds of things you want to be doing and the way you're building your portfolio as a career? Forget about the title. Go for the role, go for what you're going to be doing, go for whether it's additive and exciting. And those are the things, right? And the rest will figure itself out, by the way, because if, you'll get the next title, don't worry about that, right? Go do the things you should be doing in the world. And yeah, so, I could do a whole 2 hours on identity. This is a really big topic for me.
Yeah, and I think it's such a base level thing that most people are dealing with in our modern culture. And I'll give you the reason why I mention our modern culture is because I had someone recently, and I can't reference this article, but someone was talking about, they had a conversation with their grandfather, and the conversation went something like, Grandpa, what was your purpose when you were coming along and working, and what were you wanting to achieve and accomplish? And the grandfather just kind of chuckled and said, I went to work every day to make money so that we could eat. That was my purpose. There wasn't any, we're in our culture today. What's my purpose? What am I doing in the world? What am I want to achieve and accomplish? And I kind of picture myself having the same conversation with my grandfather if he were still alive. He goes, what do you mean purpose? I went to work every day. I think now we do have the luxury of looking more at that. But I think sometimes the money piece, the titles, the roles, the comparison with all the social channels that we could look at and see everybody's best all the time. And I think it just kind of throws gas on the fire and makes it even more difficult, which leads me, this is a little bit of a segue, to the challenges that we have as leaders. I love when I talk to people that get a perspective from a lot of leaders. And so the questions that I like to ask around that are, when you look across the landscape, and we mentioned leadership, what are some things that you like, that you feel like, well, I like where we're headed here? And then what are some things that bother you and concern you just about, we're talking about general leadership with all that you interact with, because you've got, 200 plus companies. You say, there's 5,000 plus people that I would consider leaders that are in your organization. What are some things that you're very encouraged by, and then some things that you go, ooh, we still have a long way to go here?
Yeah. Okay. So one thing that I love, and Brian Moynihan, CEO of Bank of America, I think is really somebody I respect and value as a leader. And he speaks about responsible growth, and that is a really important element to leadership in my view. And so one of the problems with Silicon Valley, the world of tech as an example, is that even though we say culture eats, strategy for lunch, and people are your most important assets, and we say all these things, and we get all like, what's your purpose? And, we get top of Maslow's hierarchy of needs sort of oriented. It all comes crashing down in the structure of our capitalist mindset. And our capitalist mindset says, grow at all costs when times are good. and cut back to the bone when times are bad. That's sort of like our mental model, right? So Spotify I've been talking about this and writing about this, but Spotify is a kind of a good example of it. They have $4 billion in the bank. They spent a ton of money last year in advance of what they were going to do, investing in the future. And then as soon as the economy sort of gets questionable, they just cut a bunch of their workforce, right? Which to me seems extremely irresponsible. It's like you need to, if you've made those investments for the future, we should be talking about responsible growth and sustainability. Don't make the investments for grow at all costs right now today. You make it because you believe that what you're investing in today is going to make a sustainable business for the future. So when things get tough, you don't just cut to the bone, you stay the course. Yes, sometimes you do have to cut, but you don't cut because you're 11 and you're following all the other ones who are cutting. And then you just say, oh, well, we overspent. Let's cut that back. And like, it's just too cavalier. And I think that's bad leadership is the cavalier hubris. And a lot of the way that venture-backed companies work, not to, shoot myself in the foot there. And I think the proper way is to think responsibly about growth. And I think very strong transparency. I don't believe in CEOs making 600 times what the lowest worker made. Like, it's just insane. That's insane. If you're going to cut from the top first, cut from the top, so I have a lot of philosophies about leadership that fly right in the face of a lot of the capitalist structure of today.
The reason I like that, and see, this is kind of me looking at some things that may be baked into my ethos that I have to be mindful of. I'm a free enterprise guy. I love business. I've been a business junkie since, I was cutting grass around the neighborhood, trying to make some money and all that. However, I love what you said, because there does appear to be capitalism has kind of gotten a little bit out of hand, and that we could be in a position where, and I have to be careful because I'm not a huge big government person either, where I like government to step in and take care of things, because that's not a good formula either.
No.
But I also am kind of wondering, how do we kind of bust up these juggernauts of large, huge mega corporations? And I actually have times, I'll go ahead and share, I'll confess to you, I actually have worked with startups, done some things, and I'm getting to where I really sometimes question that whole VC model, because that's all it's about. Not entirely. But if I don't get my ROI and I don't get my return quickly, we're done and moving on. So I guess one of the things I'm sitting here saying is, boy, how are we going to bust this thing up? What do we do?
Yeah, I also am not about, I think government and regulation has its place for sure. And I think, on the whole, the ways in which businesses are regulated is pretty good. But I think the way you change it is by changing who the leaders are. And that's why this is so important to me. Brian Moynihan is a white guy, so it's not only women kind of thing. What I'm saying though is that you do need a bigger mix of people who care deeply about the world operating differently. And if you're in the power elite, there's no desire to change the way the power elite works, but women get 2% of venture funding of billions of dollars. And yet, one of my members who's an executive in residence at Plug and Play, one of the big sort of incubator sort of places here, said 68% of seed and Series A companies are closing their doors right now. So venture capital is 68% wrong and isn't funding the Coco Browns of the world, right? And so we have to make it on our own, and we make businesses that are sustainable. And so I think, that model is questionable. Just here, take $10 million, don't worry about profitability, just go grab market share. The mindset isn't healthy for the whole. It is a California gold rush sort of mindset. And so I think the solution is that more and more people have to care more and more broadly about the whole. That I guess I always wonder, I always ask myself this question: if I'm Jeff Bezos and I have $100 billion, why can't my people make more money? But why do I not feel bad about the conditions for the workers in the what do you call them, warehouses? Like, why do I feel good about that? I don't understand it. And I think that is a question more and more people have to ask themselves, is like, why do I get to have so much? And, why is that okay? And what is a better structure for the long-term sustainability of society? And I ask that question of myself all the time, which is why I'm super transparent with my team. If I have to cut, I go first. I'm the first person to cut, and my team sees it, I share the financials with them. I say, here it is. I'm not just telling you this. Here's what we all make. What do you think? What should we do about that? Right.
Yeah.
So I think we just have to have different people leading.
I like the thought of that, because I look across the leadership landscape, and there are times, unfortunately, that I can get very discouraged. And I mean, we could look at whatever. I mean, we can look at the political arena. We can look at the business arena. For me, I look in the ministry arena, and I just see so many people that have been elevated to positions, and I ask how and why. And sometimes I do wonder if we put our leaders on too much of a pedestal, that we put them in positions that in all likelihood they're going to be challenged to reach the levels that we think. And especially, I love what you brought up, that the compensation that we're giving some of these corporate people, it makes no sense. I don't know in what universe that makes sense. And I think one of the things, I do think a lot of this is cultural. And one of the things I saw that you had were, it's kind of 5 questions that you could ask in an interview that could kind of flesh out maybe the culture. So we don't have a lot of time here, but I'm hopeful you're okay playing around a little bit, because I may play the part of a 59-year-old white guy with a little bit of gray speckle in my beard that is interviewing someone by the name of Coco Brown. And and I'm running an organization. We could define what it might be or something like that. But I think it'd be really cool for us to hopefully have fun with it, hopefully be deep with some of it also, and give some ways, because I think we need to start busting up culture. I'm all about busting tradition and things that we've always done just for the sake of doing it. And maybe conversations like this and organizations like yours help. So you okay? You want to play that game? Is that okay?
Sure.
All right.
I don't remember 5 questions, by the way, but sure, let's play it.
Do you have them? I mean, you're probably going, oh boy, I'm going to have fun with Tim here. So all right. So let's just say that. I mean, I don't know if we do virtual interviews and all now. So go ahead. We've gone through the interview. We like, you look like somebody who's a good fit. And now you're going to ask some questions. Is it okay to ask questions when you're going through the interview process, first of all?
Absolutely.
Some people don't believe that. Some people think,
what? No, it's bi-directional. You're interviewing, it's a bi-directional interview. If it's not, then you cannot be there.
Well, Coco, we're excited that you might be joining our team. Do you have any questions for me that you might need answers for?
Yeah, I would love to know, where are the women in your organization? What roles the women in your organization play?
Well, unfortunately, we do have a few that are in kind of support roles, our EAs, but currently, and we would love to have more, we just don't have more women. I don't know if we haven't had the candidates or what. So that's one reason we're excited maybe that you would be joining the team, because we'd love to have more women in the organization.
So given that you'd love to have more women in the organization, can you tell me, and not just women, but sort of broadly, in kind of creating a workforce that is really representative of the customers that you have and the ecosystem that you operate within, what are your strategies to do that?
Well, I probably have to confess that we don't have strategies. We've been continuing hiring. It's done pretty well for us up to this point, but we would like to get better. Maybe we just don't know how. But maybe we don't really even know where to go to find more. But it seems like every time we put something out there to hire, we get 99% males applying for the roles that we have. So I don't know if that makes any sense, but we just don't seem to have a lot of women to choose from for our roles, and I'm getting a little uncomfortable with the questioning, I must admit.
Well, I'm sitting, for those of you who can't see us, I'm like smiling. I hear people tell me things like this all the time. And I'll tell you what your answers so far are telling me.
Good. Yeah, fire away. Hit me hard.
Yeah, well, so your answers so far are telling me that you actually don't really care. You know that you're supposed to care, but you don't really care. And secondly, that you've left solving the problem to somebody else. And I'll tell you, this is why one of the reasons I like Brian Moynihan. He actually chairs their global diversity initiative at the company. He's not like, I'm the CEO, but the HR person runs all that stuff, right? So one of the things is like, and you don't even have to, I mean, I think if you really want, I mean, I was just gonna say, if you're a woman listening to this and you really want this job, you probably won't get it by asking these questions, because you'll make the other side uncomfortable and they'll figure out a way not to hire you, unfortunately. But I would say you don't want that job anyway. But there's other ways to find out the answers to those questions without asking those questions also. You can look at the leadership team, you can go on LinkedIn and look at the employees on LinkedIn and see what roles women play. So you can answer those questions without, saying that. But I think I would be curious about those kinds of things. If I was interviewing for a top executive role at the company, I'm reporting to the CEO and top, I would ask questions also like, what do you do in tough times? Has the company gone through a bad economic cycle, a tough time? And how do you make decisions about what you invest in during those times? To me, that's one of the biggest ways of learning what they really care about.
Yeah.
And how they think about long-term sustainable, growth.
So one thing, and I think you nailed something so well there, Coco. And so I'll be a little bit, probably a lot transparent here. I think you brought up something that I think it permeates a lot of organizations, because I'm an executive coach. I work with teams a lot myself, and I do see this. I think people know we're supposed to be doing something different. Yep. We know we need to make an adjustment. Maybe we're not making enough of adjustment, but I think deep down we do know we should. Yep. And we're challenged with making that adjustment, that leap, that shift, that change. It's too low on the priority. I don't know. I mean,
it's like asking kids
thoughts?
to eat broccoli.
Yeah. It's like,
they're supposed to eat broccoli, but they just don't want to, because why? Like, I think that's the problem with the entrenched power system, is there's no real why for them, right? We are all tuned into What's in It for Me channel. That's our number one favorite channel in the station, right? WW What's in It for Me, whatever that is.
Yeah.
So, and this is not to say that anybody is a bad person or that they wouldn't want to see things different. It's just that change happens because you want to change. Change doesn't happen because you should change. Other people want you to change. Change happens because it becomes essential to you. And I think that's where I look for leaders, is like, is this essential to you? Do you believe it so much that you're making this essential to you? Is it something that, for you say, well, that's not acceptable. I'm only looking at diverse candidates. So go find those. Because if you say that to your recruiting team, that's what they will find. They will find diverse candidates because they're out there. Yeah.
So anything else? One of the things too, I like that we could have more conversations like this, because I think that helps a little bit.
Oh,
But
yeah.
tell me, we started with this. Let's start wrapping with this also. Tell me what the Athena Alliance can do for the person that might be leading a company, or even let's say there's someone who might want to be a part of your organization. What does that look like? Let's go ahead and be a little bit practical here as we finish up with our last few questions.
Yeah. Um, so we're helping companies all the time get access to diverse um, talent. Our focus is boards and advisor roles, but we have companies come and say, hey, we're looking for a diverse executive for this role. And, do you have any suggestions? We're always happy. Companies can post roles directly to our platform. There's no charge, and we'll send them the right, minimum match 80% if that's what they want, and we'll send them the people. So we're very engaged in helping to solve the problem. We do not believe there's a pipeline problem. We believe there's a pipeline difference, but there's not a pipeline problem. Yes, there might be fewer, but that doesn't mean they don't exist. So the companies that care deeply and really want to make change happen are the ones who are playing Moneyball. They're the ones who are going out and finding where the diversity exists instead of resting on the challenge that it isn't coming to them. So one thing is, get curious about Athena, AthenaAlliance.com, two A's in the middle there, AthenaAlliance.com. In terms of getting involved with Athena, there's become a member of Athena if you're a woman leader. Men are allies. They bring their talent, their team to us. They bring their open roles to us. So there's lots of ways that you can tactically engage with Athena.
Okay, very good. And is there a type of company that would be a better profile, or is it wide open and all industries, all types of companies?
All industries, all roles, all geographies. I mean, we work with Bank of America. We work with Autodesk and Intuit and Intel, and we have members who join us from all different kinds of backgrounds in aviation and manufacturing and retail and hospitality, financial services, and so all different industries, all different roles, all different geographies. We've worked with about 43% of our members are with companies that are over 1,000 employees, 25% over 10,000 employees. And then, the other 50 some percent is companies of, generally speaking, 100 plus employees. That's sort of
Good.
the ecosystem.
So you just mentioned the website earlier. Let's go ahead and mention it again. How do you want people to connect with you? We'll include all this in the notes, but best way to connect, someone's been really intrigued or they're fascinated, want to find out more, want to connect with you. Where do you want them to go if they need to reach out to you?
AthenaAlliance.com. Not to be confused with any other Athenas. It's AthenaAlliance.com.
Right. We'll include notes down below. Man, there's so many things we could keep talking about, Coco, but I'm watching our time here. We are seek, go, create. Those three words. I'm going to give you one of those words that might resonate with you more or mean more to you at this time. Seek, go, or create. Which word do you choose and why? And that's my final question.
Seek, because I think what the world needs, and sort of illustrated in this conversation, is much more willingness to seek information from each other. I'm a huge, what would be the opposite of advocate? I'm really against cancel culture. It helps no one. Cancel culture helps absolutely no one. Ask the questions you need to ask and be sympathetic and empathetic in answering the questions that people are asking. We will only get better as a society if we can let our guard down and say the things that we need to say to get to the next place together.
Mm-hmm. That's fascinating. Thanks for sharing that. And it's interesting, when I was just putting some thought and prep into this, There were some questions, some of them that I asked. I went, ooh, I said, you know what? There's some people that may not want to ask those questions. And I'm in agreement with you. I don't like, and this is on whatever side people are on, I don't like when people can't ask questions. I love asking questions. You could probably tell. That's why I do what I do. And I am so thankful for this conversation. Coco Brown, thank you for joining us. Please go check out the Athena Alliance if you've been listening in. I want to say one more thing. If you know someone that needs to connect with this organization or with Coco, share this episode. Share it if you're watching this on YouTube or social media channels or on one of the podcast networks. Make sure that you share this, because I think that some of the things we discussed, and hopefully we were being transparent and open in a way that a lot of people aren't in today's world, it can kind of address and maybe start breaking down some of the barriers we have to really redefining what success is. I appreciate you listening in. We have new episodes every Monday. Until next time, continue being all that you were created to be.